I think it's about time I talked about something a little more wholesome.
Now you delicious!
I think I need a better understanding of what wholesome actually means to other people. Some might say that because this show has been out for over a year now, that I'm a little late to this little tea party. But I try to be optimistic and see the cup as half full. Constantly trying to keep up with everything that's popular and current is next to impossible for me. Not to mention, it's bloody exhausting. I'd much rather just talk about stuff that I find interesting within the moment and just have fun with it. This show is definitely my cup of tea. A celebratory show of retro animation from the 1930s, more specifically Fleischer Studio style. Rubber hose animation has always had a unique charm about it, and it's nice to see that this style of animation is coming back into the limelight through a fairly high profile streaming series like Cuphead. Though the show itself is actually a mix of 2D animation tracked over a 3D sculpted miniature background in what is known as the stereoscopic rotary process. It's why the backgrounds in these shows look like stop motion, because it pretty much is. This may be a painstaking and expensive process, but if you're going to celebrate 1930s animation, you have to have stereoscopic rotary in there somewhere. The game and the show feels like a love letter to the surreal and experimental hand-drawn cartoons from the 1930s. The energy of rubber hose cartoon animation has a disregard for the rules of physics in service of a gag, which admittedly is so refreshing in comparison to mainstream animation. But there's also a tiny hint of nightmare to this style of animation. It's probably to do with the era it's from. Cuphead itself is not a horror show, but it's free of any kind of restraint holding it back from being scary and creepy at times. Though the game itself was created traditionally with hand-drawn animation, the Netflix show wasn't done this way. And though some people have a problem with this, I really don't mind. The animation of this show is absolutely gorgeous. But because of the modern demands of TV production, the Netflix show couldn't be traditionally hand-drawn 2D animation. Instead, this is a replication, or as close to 2D traditional animation as they could get. But each and every background is an actual watercolor painting, and stop motion animation for certain scenes as well were used. The opening shot in particular is an obvious example. Hang on, I feel like it's only fitting to have a cup of coffee while I'm talking. So this video is about the theme of temptation. And more specifically, how the Netflix series Cuphead dealt with this particular theme. You could make an entire series of videos about temptation when it comes to Cuphead. I mean, the game is literally called Deal with the Devil. Temptation is a very heavy theme in this show and in the game. There is always a price to pay when you give in to temptations or sign a deal with the devil. In Cuphead's case, in the game, he loses at blackjack, so owes the devil his soul, as well as collecting the contracts of others who also made deals with the devil. In the show, it's a similar premise, but instead of a casino, Cuphead loses a game of soul toss in a carnival. It's later revealed at the end of season 3 that the devil has built the casino that appears in the game, so it's only fair to assume that the series is set before the events of the game, which in my opinion is pretty clever. I just wish they made that clear from the start. I just felt like having it be set at a carnival instead of a casino was a little bit of a cop-out, you know, to be more family friendly. Yeah, admittedly, the show itself doesn't exactly follow the story of the game. I was expecting it to be a sort of monster of the week type thing, with each episode being focused on one boss. The first season spends more time with Cuphead and Mugman establishing the world and the rules and getting to know the characters, while season 2 dived into more stories involving actual boss bosses from the game. The writing in each episode is pretty solid as well, but I feel that the best episode in my opinion when it comes to airtight writing is Sweet Temptation, which features the show's creepiest villain, Baroness Von Bon Bon. Oh Mary Sue, someone stole your colour palette!
How dare they use my practical guidance for color mixing and the visual effects of a specific color combination? Get your own color terminology!
It seems I've always had some kind of fascination with sugary, sweet or cute things being juxtaposed to things that are creepy and terrifying. And this episode perfectly embodies that, so no wonder this one appeals to me more than any other episode in this show. But I mean, Cuphead is inspired by animation that was made during the Great Depression, so juxtaposing sweet happy things alongside creepy is not only expected in a show like this, but is, in my opinion, an absolute must. If Cuphead didn't have the creepy factor within it, to me it just wouldn't feel like an authentic tribute to Fleischer animation from the 1930s. Though rubber-hosed animation has a unique charm about it, there's also an unrefinedness about it that sometimes dives into the uncanny valley for me. And I definitely felt that way while I was looking at the character design of Bonbon herself. I like to think that I'm pretty good at recognizing inauthenticity in characters, and I saw this immediately. It was clear that she was putting on a performance to lure Cuphead to his doom, but at the same time, this character is so bloody entertaining. It was so much fun to watch that the creepiness factor, although it was a very sudden and in-your-face moment, I very much saw it coming, and the build-up to it was, in my opinion, absolutely spot on. Remember the build-up to when the coachman's face in Disney's Pinocchio turned terrifying? I mean, I know the movie itself was released in 1940, so it's a little bit later than this era of animation, but it was in production during the 30s, so I'm going to count it. Not to mention, this movie also has a heavy theme of temptation.
Now you see, the world is full of temptation.
Temptation?
Yep, temptations. They're the wrong things that seem right at the time. But even though the right things may seem wrong sometimes the wrong things may be right at the wrong time, or vice versa.
How would you blokes like to make some real money? I'm collecting stupid little boys, the disobedient ones what play hooky from school, and I takes them to Pleasure Island. There's no risk. They never come back as boys.
That face would not have been so scary if it wasn't for the build-up that happened before that, and in this episode, it managed to achieve the same effect in an only 11-minute long runtime. Cuphead for sure has an incredibly dark sense of humour. The goofy, whimsical tone within this episode that also collides with the creepy factor is just something that really appeals to my nature. I don't know exactly what it is. All I know is that I have been obsessed with this episode since I watched it, and I had to make a video about it. And there's actually a phobia, an actual phobia of cartoon characters, specifically from this era. Chirophilonosophobia. I've probably pronounced that wrong, but I don't care. It's nice to know that there's actually a name for what's wrong with me. The episode is very much a parody of the Hansel and Gretel story. The episode is more about learning self-control than resisting temptation itself. Self-control being the ability to manage your impulses and emotions and behaviors to achieve long-term goals. But I still feel that it managed to teach the lesson while also not giving the characters a happy ending in the end. Kleptomania is a type of impulse control disorder that involves problems with emotional or behavioral self-control. Basically meaning that you have difficulty resisting temptation, or you have a powerful urge to perform an act that's excessive or harmful to you or someone else. The best way to overcome temptation is to not believe the lie and to turn around and run away.
You get to eat all the sweet treats you desire. And goodbye.
Which is what Cuphead does in this episode, funnily enough. I mean, resisting temptation and practicing self-control are very similar things. But to me, resisting temptation is more to do with not giving into someone else's pressure or manipulation to make you act or feel in a particular way, or to give in to peer pressure. I mean, peer pressure is more to do with doing something because you want to feel accepted and valued by your friends, which is definitely not the case in this episode. But on saying that, Bonbon is fast to refer to Cuphead as a friend, making him feel more guilty if he doesn't give in to her temptations.
Oh, please, we're friends now.
Not to go all philosophical on you here, but the best way to resist temptations is to be watchful and mindful of your surroundings. Which is interesting because when Cuphead is lured into Sugarland, he seems to be hypnotized into going in there by the giant mint candy. The same thing happens when he devours all of Mugman's candy. The second way is to know yourself well, or know your enemy. This is something I feel that Cuphead does show. I like to think that Cuphead is a character that knows himself very well. Number 3 is learn to recognize temptation, which is definitely something Cuphead shows that he can do. Number 4, take preventative action. Turn around and walk away. Again, this is something that Cuphead does. And finally, remember there is always a way of escape. It's interesting to see that the entrance to Sugarland is never blocked at any point. Cuphead is never forced to stay, and neither is Mugman, and even when they do turn into candy, the exit is still clear, which in my opinion is another reason why I think this episode portrays the theme of temptation in a perfect way, because it gives the characters an out. But it also symbolizes the fact that no matter how much self-control we have, temptation will always rear its ugly head. Let's take a look at the episode from the beginning. Cuphead learns that Mugman has leftover Halloween candy that he's been hiding under his bed for almost a year. How Mugman was able to resist eating all of this candy and have it last this long amazes Cuphead, because, well, obviously he would have just wolfed all of his candy down after shortly collecting it.
Wait a minute, you still have Halloween candy? It's September. How could you possibly not eat your candy for that long?
Though the fact that Mugman denied himself any candy for this long seems a little ridiculous. I mean, I'm all for rewarding yourself after certain trauma. I mean, especially when your brother sticks a firecracker down your pants.
Yeah, hilarious. Oh. Ouch!
Yeah, Cuphead is definitely the more impulsive of the two, whereas Mugman, though not as impulsive as Cuphead, he is easily swayed. He may be more cautious and more aware of the world around him, but his brother always manages to lure him into trouble. So after Cuphead devours all of Mugman's Halloween candy...
You ate my candy? I'll make it up to you. I'll do anything. Anything?
Mugman kicks him out of the house and tells him not to come back until he learns about self-control.
Get out! And don't come back until you learn some self-control!
While Cuphead is out wandering around in the woods, contemplating what just happened, he discovers a world made entirely of sweets called Sugarland. This song, by the way, is so Danny Elfman-ish, it's not even funny. I'm sure that was deliberate.
Welcome to this land of sugar. Everything is simply grand. Everything is super yummy in this place called Sugarland.
Immediately, it gives you a feeling of eeriness and uncertainty. It's a beautiful world full of candy, but there's not a single living thing in sight. Well, unless you count the flying platforms in the background. When Cuphead discovers Sugarland, he also encounters the ruler of said land, Baroness Von Bon Bon, who I have been obsessed with since I saw this episode. She thinks she's made of candy. She announces to Cuphead that today is his lucky day and he gets to eat all the candy treats he desires.
My name is Baroness Von Bon Bon, and today is your lucky day. You get to eat all the sweet treats you desire.
Though in a surprising twist, Cuphead doesn't actually give in to his desires. Cuphead has read all the fairy tales and recognizes that this may be a trap.
It's a trap!
That's another stamp for Star Wars reference bingo. In spite of Bonbon's persistence, Cuphead does run out of Sugarland and is proud of himself for resisting temptation and actually practicing self-control. Though Bonbon gives a hauntingly creepy farewell and says he will be back.
You'll be back. Toodaloo.
When he gets back to Mugman, Mugman is still angry at him for eating all of his candy.
You're still upset, huh?
So you have chosen death.
So Cuphead decides to make it up to him by telling him about Sugarland in spite being told not to.
Rule number 1. Tell no one about Sugarland.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination.
After the brothers indulge themselves in all the sweets they can eat, Mugman unknowingly breaks the second rule because Cuphead for some reason didn't tell his brother about the rule about not eating Bonbon's castle. This actually causes them to both transform into candy, and then they are chased by the Baroness, who reveals that she eats people who turn into candy after they break one or both of her rules. Though the brothers do manage to escape Sugarland, they retain their candy forms, and it's implied that Elder Kettle enters into a sugar-induced trance and devours the boys. I've been trying to figure out why this episode stuck with me more than any other episode. I mean, yeah, a lot of it is to do with Bonbon herself, but I also think there's more to it than that. I think the themes of temptation and self-control over one's impulses, emotions, and desires, and of course the theme of impulsivity, you know, the tendency to act without thinking, for example. Impulsivity, self-control, and even gluttony.
This is the gluttony department. Our reports have shown an 89% increase in global overeating.
Oh, how delicious.
We've also branched out into hunger-induced rage.
But the interesting thing is that both of the Cuphead brothers show impulsive behaviors, not just Cuphead. So what are the 5 impulsive behaviors? Well, you have excessive drinking, which is funny because they're literally living cups. Taking drugs, well, sugar is just as addictive as cocaine, they say.
There was a little powdered sugar mishap. No problem. I never say no to extra sugar.
Becoming violent and aggressive. Do I need to put footage from the video game here? Gambling? We have a winner! And binge eating. I refer you back to this clip. Though both of the brothers are impulsive to a point, Cuphead's lack of self-control is nicely contrasted with Mugman's self-denial, as showcased at the beginning of the episode where Mugman takes a single piece of candy and eats it like a delicate gourmet dish, whereas Cuphead devours all of the candy in one go without savouring any taste. I think the other reason this episode appeals to me is that there's obvious similar themes to other popular stories like Alice in Wonderland, of course, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory being the most obvious one. I mean, let's face it, if the Queen of Hearts and Willy Wonka had a baby, although in my canon Willy Wonka is asexual and aromantic, they would probably birth something similar to Baroness Von Bon Bon. Though Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is more a story of warning about the dangers of indulgence. The obvious difference here would be this isn't a factory, this is a whole land, not just covered in candy, but is made of candy. Even the buildings are made of candy. Everything in this land is edible. Even I'm edible, but that is called cannibalism and is frowned upon in most societies. The eerie thing about this is that there's not a single living thing in sight. It's still whimsical and silly and very surreal and nonsensical, but that's no surprise considering that's kind of how Inkwell Isle is. But there's also something very disturbing about seeing something like cakes and sweets turned giant size. I mean, I don't think I'm megalophobic, but something about seeing something that is edible being the size of a building, I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way. Though like I said a minute ago, there aren't any living things in Sugarland. But there are sentient candy characters on Inkwell Isles. Are they children who were lured to Sugarland and were turned to a sweet treat and managed to escape? I mean, it would explain a lot, but it would also imply that some of these children didn't make it out alive because...
Yeah, I'll be back. Toodaloo. But I'll be back. They always come back.
Let's talk about Baroness Von Bon Bon, shall we? Here's a new word I learned recently. Machiavellism. It's a personality trait that denotes cunningness, the ability to be manipulative, and a drive to use whatever means necessary to gain power. I mean, Baroness Von Bon Bon doesn't necessarily need to gain power. She already is a baroness.
I'm a baroness.
But Baroness is not a title you are born into. That is something that you only get by marrying. It is also the lowest of all of the noble titles. So how did Bonbon become a baroness? This is the thing. Did Sugarland have a baron before? If so, where is the baron? What happened to them? Did Bonbon kill them? Like, what's going on here? Did he escape? This is the questions I'm asking. Bonbon uses manipulation tactics to lure children into Sugarland so that she can eat them. She does this through gaslighting,
Didn't you hear the song?
giving generalizations to an entire group of people in the same demographic,
Most disgusting children. Just can't resist.
I bring you back to my point of the sentient candy people living on Inkwell Isles are very likely to be children that wandered into Sugarland that happened to manage to escape her clutches, but sadly remained candy treats. She also uses guilt trips. A manipulator uses guilt trips in order to change how the victim may be feeling at the time. After basically insulting his entire demographic, Cuphead tells her that she has a really creepy way about her, and she responds with guilt tripping him and painting herself as a victim by saying that she doesn't get out much and that she is trapped in Sugarland on account of an ancient curse.
I don't get out much. In fact, I can't leave Sugarland on account of an ancient curse. But that's a story for another time.
We never learn what this ancient curse is. What is this curse? I would only assume it has something to do with the devil. Maybe she made a deal with him or he made a deal with her so that she wasn't going around eating all the children. I don't know. This is getting really dark here. Bonbon also uses love bombing. The minute Cuphead arrives in Sugarland, she introduces herself and tells him that today is his lucky day.
Today is your lucky day. You get to eat all the sweet treats you desire.
It just so happens that everything he can see is made of candy. When Cuphead turns about face and says goodbye, she asks him,
Where you going? I offered you all the sweet treats you desire. Ain't you gonna eat my sweets?
After explaining to her that he read the fairy tales and knows if he eats the candy he will get eaten, she uses flattery in an incredibly insincere and excessive way.
This is funny. You're a funny guy.
And then goes on to tell him that she only eats sweet treats.
Mwah.
Which funnily enough he gets turned into later on. Let's not forget that she refers to herself as a baroness. Talk about a corrupted official, huh? Don't be too trusting of strangers. Strangers immediately offering you goodies and treats the minute they meet you is not a good sign, and luckily Cuphead is not dumb enough to fall for this right away. Being immediately suspicious of Bonbon actually shows a level of maturity on Cuphead's part, which I was very surprised at. I mean, the candy is laid out in open sight. If this doesn't scream death trap, I don't know what does it. No, come on, we did that joke earlier. But she also refers to children as disgusting, hinting a dislike toward them. She's really manipulative as she tries to tempt Cuphead into eating her castle and even turning her back in case he wanted to sneak a bite. Of course, when Cuphead returns with Mugman later on, she was shown to be gleeful when 2 rules that she explicitly told him not to break. She can now reveal her true intentions. Be a French taunter.
Go and boil your bottom, sons of a silly person. I fart in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster and your father smelt of elderberries.
Nah, but seriously here. Bonbon is in fact an evil and murderous creature that turns children who break her rules into candy so that she can eat them. But in spite of all of these negative traits, Bonbon is so much fun to watch. She has a sense of humor. One of the funniest jokes I love in the show is when Cuphead calls her the Baroness and she says, "Oh please, we're friends now. Call me the."
I'm sorry I misjudged you, the Baroness.
Oh, please, we're friends now. Call me the.
That's great. I love that. Continuing on from this, would you refer to Bonbon as a Stepford Smiler? You know, the trope that the smile hides a mental instability and even madness. That would be a resounding yes. I mean, at first Bonbon appears as a very sweet and jolly individual, offering Cuphead the chance to eat all the sweets he desires, but during her introduction she's shown to be really unstable and unhinged, frequently laughing and grinning maniacally and moving incredibly erratically. I mean, the animation here is amazing, and of course, the voice acting is just stellar. She may also be a little bit of a doofus. There is another trope that is called Beware the Silly Ones, when they laugh in the face of the main character for no real reason. Though acting silly does not mean you aren't a one-man army. When Bonbon turns, she chases after Cuphead and Mugman while atop her castle, which is now also sentient and chases after them like a giant monster. But she's also laughably evil. You know, villains like the Joker or Harley Quinn or Pennywise come to mind because villains can be funny, and when a character makes you laugh, you do form some kind of affection towards them. I mean, another perfect example would be the Magnificent Bastard trope. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Ooh, a piece of candy.
I should also point out that when Bonbon tells Cuphead her 2 rules, tell no one about Sugarland and eat all the candy treats you desire, just not my candy castle, not even a teensy bite. The way that the voice actor delivers these lines reminds me of when the genie from Disney's Aladdin tells his 3 rules. I mean, the characters are vastly different here, but the delivery just was so similar. I can't help but think that maybe this was a little bit inspired by this moment in the Disney movie.
So long as you never break my 2 rules. Rule number 1. Tell no one about Sugarland. And rule number 2. Eat all the candy you desire. Just not my candy castle.
Rule number 1, I can't kill anybody.
Yeah, so don't ask.
Rule number 2, I can't make anybody fall in love with anybody else. Rule number 3,
I can't bring people back from the dead. It's not a pretty picture. I don't like doing it.
So even though Cuphead and Mugman do escape from Sugarland, it is implied that Elder Kettle devours them because they didn't change back. They were still candy when they returned home. It's a very bittersweet episode. Pardon the pun. Not every episode of Cuphead has a happy ending, and this happens to be one of them. This is actually a very dark show, but I also consider it to be possibly one of the best, if not the best series that is based on a video game ever made. But I also feel that the way that this particular episode dealt with the themes of self-control and temptation were done flawlessly. The writing in this episode is so tight. I can't fault it for anything. I just really needed to get all of this out because I have been obsessed with Bonbon for so long, but also with this particular episode being one of the best cartoons I have ever seen. I've watched it so many times I know it word for word by now. And after the last few videos I've done, I needed something a bit more wholesome to talk about. And when I say wholesome, I'm using the term loosely because after all, Bonbon is call her a cannibal? I don't know. I'm Mad Munchkin, stay creative!